Chapter 2 Road, Part 2. Pinkie made an enormous fuss when Twilight cut out the barbed bolt with the sharp edge of Solstice, but fortunately kept still. With the bolt head free, Twilight placed a hoof on Pinkie's flank to keep pressure on the wound, and reached with her mouth to retrieve a healing potion for Pinkie to drink. The moment Twilight's hoof came to rest, she felt a surge of power pass down her foreleg and into Pinkie. Twilight abruptly jerked her hoof back. The wound was gone.
Ooh!
Pinkie turned her head to look back at Twilight.
I didn't know you could do healing spells.
Twilight blinked, looking at her hoof.
I can't.
Twilight tried to explain what happened while she and Pinkie lashed the unconscious bandits together, relieving them of their weapons and any valuables in the process.
It wasn't a spell, Pinkie. Spells do come from within, but also from magic in Equestria and other planes that unicorns can channel through their horn. This came entirely from somewhere inside,
she said.
So, more like a cleric or a druid then?
Pinkie mused while she checked over some of her knots.
Isn't 3 classes a little much, Twilight? No, not like a cleric or a druid,
Twilight said, exasperated.
A cleric gets their power from the sun or the moon or some other celestial body and the divine spirit associated with it. And druids get their power from nature in a similar fashion, no horn necessary.
She gestured widely at the sky and at the land around them.
Their power comes from out there.
She tapped her own chest.
Not in here.
She paused, looking at Pinkie oddly.
What was that about classes? Huh?
Pinkie grunted around a piece of rope.
Never mind.
Twilight set back to the task of tying up the bandits, silently thanking the book Adventuring 101 for reminding her to bring at least a 50-hoof spans of rope. After a few more well-placed knots, she was certain the bandits wouldn't be getting free anytime soon. They were all tied up hoof to hoof in a pretzel shape, Pinkie's idea. Twilight almost wished they could stick around to watch the would-be bandits try to get untangled. Twilight and Pinkie packed up and prepared to hit the road. As they left, Twilight paused to look down at the corpse of the bandit she had killed. Dark thoughts flickered through her mind.
What did I feel when I cut open his throat?
She wondered. She couldn't remember. Pinkie stepped up behind her, placing her hoof on Twilight's flank comfortingly.
Are you okay, Twi? I'm fine.
Twilight lied and turned away from the corpse. Twilight groaned in frustration.
We should be there by now.
Her horn spread a pool of light ahead of them, giving them enough light to see the road. The sun had vanished completely beneath the horizon over an hour ago, and she felt 10 times as exhausted as she had been when Starscroll had pushed them last night.
We're almost there! Look!
Pinkie pulled her into a headlock and pointed ahead of them with her hoof, slightly upwards.
Pinkie, there's nothing there. Huh?
Twilight paused and squinted when she noticed rectangles of warm firelight hovering above them in the night sky where Pinkie's hoof pointed. With the glow of her horn in the way, she hadn't noticed the lights before.
Oh,
she said dumbly.
The inn must be on a hill, and we're seeing the light in the windows. It could still be miles, though. Nope.
Pinkie grinned, pointing lower.
Yeah!
Twilight recoiled in fear. Something massive loomed over them. And then she felt stupid when the threat resolved into a fortified stone wall. She took a couple of steps forward, and the light of her horn illuminated an iron portcullis set into the wall. Above the gate, a painted sign read, "Welcome to the Helping Hoof."
A strange inn,
Twilight muttered, as she took a step onto a wooden drawbridge that spanned a dry ditch between them and the portcullis. She crossed the drawbridge, her eyes scanning the gatehouse topping the wall above them for a gatekeeper.
Hello?
she called.
Let us in!
Pinkie whined from beside her. A wooden shutter on one of the gatehouse windows slammed open, and a voice called out, "Who's making such a racket?"
We're weary travelers looking for a place to stay the night,
Twilight answered. A wrinkled old pony stuck his head out the window. "There's no admittance after dark," he said. "Sorry, come back in the morning." His head whisked back into the interior of the gatehouse. Twilight stomped furiously on the wooden drawbridge.
No admittance after dark? This is an inn! How do you even do business?
The old pony's head poked back out. "The Helping Hoof is doing just fine, thank you very much. With all the bandit trouble afoot, the guests are more comfortable if we close up after dark."
We're not bandits!
Twilight shouted, fuming. The gatekeeper harumphed. "Likely story." Pinkie looked up at the gatekeeper with large, sad eyes.
Please let us in?
The gatekeeper yielded to Pinkie's pleading stare. All right. I suppose I could make an exception," he said. "But before I let you in, you have to agree to these terms. If you act out in violence against any other guest, you will be thrown out. If you attempt to kill any other guest in anything short of self-defense, our guards will kill you. Do you agree?"
Yes.
Pinkie and Twilight said in unison. "Names and purpose?"
Pinkie Pie.
Pinkie said.
Midnight Shine.
Twilight lied.
And we're here to meet some friends.
Fair enough. Welcome to the Helping Hoof. Now let me get the gate. They heard some muttering and grunts of exertion from the open gatehouse window before the sound of clattering chains filled the night air. The portcullis rose slowly. When it had fully receded up into the wall, it settled onto a locking mechanism with a dull thump. Twilight and Pinkie crossed under the arch of the gate, entering the courtyard of the Helping Hoof. Twilight sighed in relief when the portcullis fell shut behind them with a clang. Finally, they had reached a place of safety after a long and dangerous march. "You can rent a room from the innkeep in the keep," the gatekeeper called from behind them. Pinkie giggled.
Innkeep in the keep.
Twilight gazed up at the keep. Its windows housed the warm glow they had seen from the road. It rose up multiple stories from where it stood in the corner of the outer wall. Twilight noted with a hint of scorn that, unlike the freestanding keep that housed Candlekeep's library, the keep here was essentially just an oversized tower. But the stone wall around them comforted her. It reminded her of home, even though the keep was wrong. Eagerly, she made her way across the courtyard toward the steps that led up to the keep entrance. She knew a soft bed, a warm fire, and maybe even a bath awaited her inside. As she approached the base of the steps, a unicorn appeared from the keep's doorway. The sound of boisterous laughter and clattering mugs filtered out into the night air before the unicorn shut the door with his levitation. He was young, handsome even. He wore dark wizardly robes, and Twilight estimated from his appearance that he possessed some magical ability as a spellcaster, probably more than her. "Hello, travelers," he said with a warm smile. He trotted down to the bottom of the steps to meet them. Twilight nodded to him.
Hello?
She stepped to make her way past the unicorn. In response, he moved to block her path. Hold on a moment. Are you by chance a friend of Star Swirl's? Twilight Sparkle, maybe?
Nope, her name is Midnight Shine. Definitely not Twilight Sparkle.
Pinkie said with a laugh.
I can understand the confusion, though. She's very sparkly.
She grabbed Twilight by her hoof and dragged her roughly past the unicorn in the dark robes.
Sorry, gotta go. Better get a room and all that.
Twilight bit her lip as Pinkie tugged her away, torn. Maybe this unicorn was the pony Star Swirl had intended to meet. However, something had Pinkie on edge. Trusting her friend's judgment, Twilight let her pull her up the stairs. Before they reached the top of the steps, she felt cool air brush against her flank. She glanced over her shoulder. The unicorn held the edge of her cloak with the red aura of his magic, lifting it high enough to get a glimpse of her mark. He grinned. Nice try. The unicorn's horn lit with a spell, and he closed his eyes in concentration. Twilight drew Solstice. She wished she could cast a quick magic missile to stop the unicorn, but with the stress of the last couple of days, the sleep spell she had cast on the bandits was the only bit of magic she'd managed to hold on to. Solstice was all she had left. Still, if she could land a blow before he finished casting, she could break his focus. She charged down the steps, and Pinkie joined her with a shrill battle cry. The unicorn finished his spell before they could close the gap. He conjured a dark gate at the base of the steps, and two fiends stepped out of it before it snapped shut with a crack. Pinkie and Twilight scrabbled to a stop on the wooden steps to avoid crashing into the spiny, Tartarus-spawned creatures. The demons shared little in common with ponies, except for their shape. Everything about them revolted Twilight, especially the spikes that stabbed grotesquely from their naked red skin. They hissed, baring their carnivorous canines at Twilight and Pinkie. Pinkie jumped over the railing and off the edge of the stairs. She hit the ground running. On fleet hooves, she advanced to confront the wizard, leaving Twilight to deal with the fiends on her own. One of the fiends lunged out ahead of the other. She sidestepped evenly, opening a space between her and Solstice. As the demon moved past her, she laid open its far side with the sharp edge of her blade. Caught off guard, the fiend squealed in pain and tumbled against the railing. Twilight felt a thrill run through her. She had dealt a mortal blow to the creature. Her elation vanished when she realized her maneuver left her exposed to the second fiend. Before she could reposition Solstice, the creature lunged forward, slamming into her. Pain blossomed in her mind as its spikes gouged her forelegs and chest. The force of the impact broke her levitation spell, and she heard Solstice clatter on the steps beside her. Now, instead of the thrill she had felt moments ago, terror gripped her heart. The fiend had her sprawled on her back and cornered between the wooden steps and the stone wall of the keep. It leaned in for the kill. Desperate, Twilight pushed against it with her forehooves, straining to keep it away. Its sulphurous breath stung her nostrils, and droplets of its spittle singed her coat where they landed. It slowly pressed forward, its gnashing teeth getting closer to ripping out her throat with each passing moment. Twilight flicked her eyes to where Solstice lay beside her. Before the fiend could kill her, Twilight snatched up the blade. She stabbed the sword into the side of the fiend's head. She didn't stop pushing with her magic until she heard the dull thunk of Solstice's hilt hitting bone. A sense of relief filled her when the demon went limp. Sizzling with heat, the fiend's black blood seeped out from where her sword protruded from its skull. Before the blood could fall and burn her, Twilight threw the corpse aside, Solstice still lodged firmly in its skull. With the second fiend out of the way, Twilight focused on the wizard. She saw 4 copies of the unicorn smirking up at her from the base of the steps.
A mirror image spell,
she realized. They pointed their horns at her in triumph. Twilight watched as Pinkie attempted to land a blow, but instead of connecting with the wizard, her hoof evaporated one of the images. Electricity surged down the length of their horns toward her. His next spell was nearly complete. Twilight closed her eyes. With Solstice stuck in the fiend's head, she was out of options. It was over. In an instant, mage lightning would course through her body, stopping her heart and leaving her a burned corpse on the steps. She heard the door at the top of the stairs slam open, but it sounded like it was worlds away from her.
I'm sorry,
She breathed, hoping that somewhere, Star Swirl's spirit would hear her last apology. He had sacrificed himself, and she had already failed. Death never came to Twilight. Instead, something zipped past her ahead with tremendous force. She opened her eyes just in time to see the spiked tip of a golden chain strike true, impaling the wizard in the dark robes. The remaining two images collapsed, and he stood there for a moment, while the life left his eyes. As the body fell, the chain clattered back up the steps from whence it came. Twilight turned to look. Above her stood an earth pony with an orange coat and a straw blonde mane and tail. The firelight from the doorway illuminated one side of her face, but left the opposite side shrouded in shadow. The pony expertly wrapped the golden chain around her tail. "Demon-calling scum," the pony said as she spat over the railing. Twilight stumbled to her feet, the cuts on her forelegs and chest burning. Her sticky red blood matted her fur. With a sense of satisfaction, she watched the two corpses of the fiends she had killed slowly evaporate as their spirits returned to Tartarus. "Well, you don't look so good," the newcomer said as she approached. Her voice carried a rough country drawl. Twilight started to limp up the stairs.
I'm fine,
she said. The newcomer spun her around with deft hooves, pointing her back down the stairs.
No. Shrine's back down. You need to see a cleric.
Twilight caught a pink blur out of the corner of her eye. An instant later, Pinkie had her forelegs wrapped around the newcomer's neck affectionately.
You saved her!
She squealed, squeezing.
Choking!
The orange pony coughed. Pinkie released her.
Sorry. I don't need a cleric,
Twilight grumbled. She pulled a healing potion out of her bag and prepared to drink it.
I've got these.
Drinking that won't do you much good. The orange pony eyed her up and down.
Them fiends have a bit of venom in their spines that obstructs healing. You'll need those cuts clean with a bit of blessed water or more powerful healing magic than what's in those potions. Right.
Twilight returned the potion to her bag. She knew that. She had read all about fiends and numerous other demons in a book. She chalked the lapse up to a fit of exhaustion.
Where's the shrine, then?
I'll walk you over, the orange pony said. Twilight made it across the courtyard by leaning on Pinkie. By then, a few uniformed guards had noticed the corpse at the bottom of the stairs and come down off the walls and towards the inn. They watched the trio, no doubt attempting to determine the correct course of action.
Here we are,
the orange pony announced. She ducked into the doorway of a small stone building nestled in a corner where the rectangular keep met the outer wall. Two burning torches flanked the door, illuminating a stylized brass sun that hung above. Twilight and Pinkie followed her inside. A small basin of glowing water lit the interior of the shrine with a warm white light. Beyond it, a mint green unicorn lay drooling on a stone altar inscribed with an image of the sun. Her snores filled the small space as she blissfully snoozed.
Hey, Lyra, you awake?
The orange pony said quietly. Lyra jumped up, blinking the sleep from her eyes.
Huh? What? I'm awake.
She sputtered. She wiped the drool off the corner of her mouth with a forehoof. Then her eyes settled on Twilight.
You don't look so good. Yeah, so I've been told,
Twilight said.
Can you help me?
She's been in a tussle with a fiend, the orange pony explained.
A fiend? Here? How did that happen?
Lyra asked as she led Twilight over to the basin. Before Twilight could tell her story, a guard stallion barged into the shrine. Twilight noticed that he wore a uniquely patterned uniform. He probably held a position of rank in the guard here. Miss Applejack, can you explain the violent death of the pony Tarning Stroke? He said with authority. Applejack faced the guard's pony down, her eyes smoldering. I can, and I will. She pointed at Twilight with a hoof. This mare was accosted by a fiend-summoning sorcerer who would have taken her life had I not intervened.
I don't think he was a sorcerer,
Twilight interrupted automatically. Her mind felt cloudy.
He seemed to cast more like a wizard, drawing on rigorous study and magical knowledge rather than intuitive power. I guess he might have been a sorcerer, though. It can be tough to tell them apart.
She rambled. Applejack advanced on the guard's pony and talked over Twilight's muttering. I killed him, and I wouldn't have needed to if you'd been better at doing your job. She punctuated her final sentence by prodding the guard's pony in the chest. I understand, Miss Applejack. Thank you for your statement. He backed down, retreating halfway out the door. But as you surely understand, I have to explore all avenues of possibility. I don't believe anyone saw the start of the fight, and these newcomers are completely unknown to us.
It was self-defense,
Pinkie interjected, glaring at the guard's pony. You don't believe me? Why don't you get Lyra to question the body? Applejack challenged. In fact, I demand it. I want to know what kind of beef the Fiend Summoner had with these two travelers.
Oh no.
Lyra shook her head.
I hate doing that.
She muttered as she removed Twilight's saddlebags and cloak. She situated Twilight next to the basin. Applejack pushed past the guard's pony and out into the courtyard. In fact, I'll even carry him over for you. That won't be necessary, Applejack. The guard can handle this. The guard's pony blustered, his voice fading as he chased Applejack out.
Good. Now I can get some quiet while I work.
Lyra grumbled as she started to clean Twilight's wounds with water from the basin. Twilight murmured at the pleasant feeling of the warm water cleaning the sting from the gashes. She relaxed on her back next to the basin with her legs sticking up in the air where Lyra could access them easily. Her eyes slid shut. Twilight started awake when Applejack dumped the body of the dead unicorn on the altar behind her. The guard's pony trailed close behind. Twilight noticed that she didn't feel any pain, and her forelegs looked like they'd never even been injured. She picked herself up off the floor to watch as Lyra stood over the corpse.
The power of the sun compels you to speak, corpse,
Lyra chanted, her eyes lighting with a golden glow. The eyes of the corpse filled with the same light, and Lyra went rigid. The corpse spoke. It was not the voice of Tarn that left the corpse's lips, but the voice of Lyra.
I am compelled to answer.
Why did you try and kill this Twilight pony? Applejack blurted, before the guard's pony could pose a question to the corpse.
I was ordered to wait here and watch for Star Swirl and his ward.
Twilight saw Applejack grow more alert and intent when the corpse mentioned Star Swirl. Applejack peered at her while the corpse finished answering the question.
If I saw them traveling the road or at the inn, I was to inform the Black Knight. But I found Twilight Sparkle on her own. I knew if I succeeded, I would be rewarded.
Twilight shivered when Tarn mentioned the Black Knight. That must have been what the armored pony that killed Star Swirl called himself. She wondered if he had a real name.
Hey, she wasn't alone. I was there,
Pinkie said from the corner of the room. Applejack held up a hoof to shush the guard's pony before he could ask the next question. Whose orders were you acting on?
I was acting on the orders of Hay Brittle.
Where is Hay Brittle? Applejack said.
I do not know.
What are Hay Brittle's responsibilities? Applejack pressed.
He is coordinator of the Appaloosan Mines Project.
The glow faded, and Lyra gasped in a breath.
All right, that's all. No more of that. Ugh.
Lyra shook her head.
Thank you kindly, Lyra.
Applejack inclined her head to the cleric. You were very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Lyra grumbled.
Now thank me by getting this corpse out of my shrine. You're lucky I owe your granny a favor, or else you'd owe me a couple 100 bits for all this trouble.
Applejack chuckled lightly as she hefted the corpse onto her back. You got that right. She adjusted the corpse so that its limp limbs fell around her torso and looked at Twilight. So you're Star Swirl's ward. That explains a lot. Come with me up to the keep. I know someone who would like to speak with you. I just have to drop this body off with the guard before we go. Twilight nodded. Perhaps she had finally found the friend Star Swirl intended to meet. Ponies and a couple of other creatures sat around circular tables on the main level of the inn within the keep. They swapped stories over mugs full of cider. It was crowded, despite, or perhaps because of, the late hour. Barmaids nimbly navigated the chaos, serving drinks and collecting bits. Applejack guided Twilight and Pinkie to a table where a wrinkled old green mare with white hair and a big red stallion sat. Twilight slumped wearily onto an offered chair. The smell of stew in a large pot in the middle of the table woke her up a little bit, and her mouth started to water at the thought of a warm meal. Pinkie's stomach growled beside her.
Big Mac, why don't you serve these two mares some supper?
The old mare spoke, her voice creaking. The big red stallion nodded, then ladled both Twilight and Pinkie a heaping bowlful of hearty potato and vegetable stew. They both dug in eagerly. Twilight opted to simply eat out of her bowl like Pinkie was, instead of investing energy in levitating a spoon.
This is Twilight Sparkle,
Applejack introduced her.
Twilight, this is Granny Smith and Big Macintosh. And I'm Applejack. We're the Apple Clan.
Twilight lifted her head out of the bowl and swallowed. She stared at Granny Smith in shock.
You killed the Lich Mortimer who held the force east of here in shadow!
Twilight cringed at her own outburst.
Well, you and Star Swirl and the rest of your group.
Granny Smith chuckled.
That's right, lassie. That was over a century ago, though. I'm a family mare now. Got the Apple Clan to look after. My adventuring days are long behind me. So are Star Swirl's.
Twilight murmured morosely, laying her head on the table.
I'm afraid I gotta ask, Twilight. But do you know where Star Swirl is?
Granny said.
He's dead,
Twilight said, focusing on the grain of the table. A now familiar dull throb returned to her chest.
A pony that I believe calls himself the Black Knight killed him.
She closed her eyes tightly while she struggled to hold back tears.
He died trying to save me.
Granny hung her head.
I can't say it surprises me to hear that.
She heaved a weathered sigh.
If Star Swirl were still with us, I knew he'd be with you. World and kind, old do-gooders like him and me.
She reached over with a hoof and patted Twilight's head.
I wish I could do more for you. I'm sure you want to get to the bottom of this. What I can do is send my granddaughter Jackie with you. She'll keep you safe.
Twilight sniffled and opened her eyes to look across the table at Granny Smith, grateful for her kindness.
Thank you.